Well, welcome to our next edition of WARBC Pastor Meet and Greet. I got Pastor Steve Svendsen. Am I saying your name right when I pronounce that?
Just pretend it's a W. Swenson.
Swenson. See,
There
this is why we do these videos right
you
here.
go. There you
Yeah,
go.
you learn new things all the time here. So yes, so glad that you joined us here today. And yeah, tell us a little bit about where you're ministering, how long you've been there, and yeah, just a little bit about that ministry background.
Yeah. We are Providence Church in Rice Lake, Wisconsin. I came in 1988, so we're coming up on 36 years ago.
Wow.
This was a Hiawatha turned Continental Baptist Missions church plant. So way back. And so there were pastors associated with the mission board who were both church planters. Bob Trilek was the church planter here, and then Robert Jocelyn came, and the church. Well, I'll go air quotes, self-supporting. When Pastor Jocelyn was here, those missionaries lived on almost nothing, but they called it self-supporting, and and then for a short period of time between Jocelyn and Bob Trilek, there was a missionary named Jim Newman, and he's kind of a legend in our fellowship because he's the guy who preached to empty buildings, ours included. When no one would show up, he said, "God called me to preach, and so I'm going to preach." He was
Really?
so people would show up in the middle of the service. Anyway, that was the building. It was actually, I think, the second building they were in. And then after Pastor Jocelyn followed him, uh, he was here for 16 years. Jocelyn was here, and then I actually was living in Milwaukee and
Hmm.
helping with the WRBC church plant in Franklin at the time,
Hmm.
working with James Maxwell, and he said, "Hey, Steve, are you interested in pastoral ministry like me?" I was working for the Prudential in Milwaukee
Hmm.
at the time, and he said, "Could I give your name to a church?" So there we ended up there.
There we
So
go.
up north, and I won't say I've never regretted it.
I mean, it's even Monday, so of course.
Yeah, so I mean, if the damn times I regretted it, usually on a Monday,
Yeah.
but yeah, so lots of ministry experience, made all my mistakes on the same bunch.
Yeah. Well, hey, let me commend you. I mean, 36 years in the same place. That's highly, as you know, that's highly unusual. And that's great, and we all feel like quitting at times, every one of us. And so I'm glad you haven't done that. So that's great. What about some of your training background, like schooling, education? I mean, you came from like a world of finance, it sounds like.
I didn't. I went to Faith Baptist Bible College, and
Okay.
I was a pastoral major.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so our senior year, boy, I could talk a long time about this, but my senior year at Faith, Paul Tassel came and spoke with a very small group of pastoral students. It wasn't a very big school. Um, but he just challenged us, guys, don't just sit around waiting for the comfortable church to call you. Just,
Mm,
get to work, get involved in ministry. So our intent in moving to Milwaukee was actually to plant a church.
gotcha.
At that point in time, there were no evangelical churches of any stripe other than kind of a really liberal American Baptist church in Germantown. And so a friend of mine said, "Hey, should we see if we can start a church in Germantown?" So there was another church plant in Sussex at the time, and that's where we went and kind of did an internship and had to work somewhere. So I ended up at Prudential
Sure.
for a couple of years while we were there. So we were only in Milwaukee a couple of years,
Okay.
but as soon as we moved there were like six groups that targeted Germantown and moved in, and we decided that maybe that wasn't the best place to start a church. So
Sure.
we helped other people out for a couple of years.
That's great. That's great. And then the Lord opened doors to get to Rice Lake, and yeah, so there you are. So okay, so you've been there 36 years. What about your family? How long you been married, children, things like that?
Yeah. Sarah and I were married in 1985.
Okay.
So we're coming up on 39 in June,
Awesome.
and we have 9 kids. and a
Praise the Lord.
whole bunch of grandkids. I'm losing count because my daughter has foster kids come. I think we're at about 16 this week.
This week. I love that. That's great. 9 children. So what's the age range? If you can remember here, because I know that when he gets this age, it's a little harder when
Right.
he.
Yeah. Yeah. Our oldest actually is at Woodruff Baptist Church,
Oh, okay.
Steve Jr. And Steve is 37.
Okay.
And then we go down to we have a 16-year-old
Hmm.
who's a sophomore in high school.
All right. Very cool. So you got married in 85. I'm not going to tell you how old I was in 85 because that'll make you feel kind of old. But I definitely was alive and kicking for a while, but I was pretty young. I'll put it that way. Um, so okay, so your wife Sarah married for 39 years, 9 children. Um, and what types of hobbies or things that do you like to do when you need to recharge or something? What do you like to do?
Sure. Historically, I would say I'm a pretty boring person. I didn't have hobbies, and I felt guilty about having hobbies because everything I did was like, if I'm reading to preach, or with a number of children. Now you get home, it's piranha hour, and so it's just like playing with kids. And people would say, "What books have you read?" And it's like, well, Good Night Moon and The House on the Side of the Tree. So
Yeah,
our lives have been very filled with children, but
yeah.
a few years ago, quite a few years ago, one of our young college men came and he said, "Pastor Steve, you like coffee? And I want you to try this." So he gave me some uh, a coffee from just fresh roasted stuff, and I thought, boy, is that good.
Mm,
And I kept running into people who like to roast coffee, and I thought, I'm just going to try that. So
oh,
for the last 10 or 15 years, that's been my I go out in my garage and I have a popcorn popper, an air popper with a hurricane lamp chimney, and I have a process that I just it's relaxing to me.
mm.
So I know Spurgeon smoked cigars. I roast coffee.
Yeah, actually, when you were telling the story, my mind was thinking to a friend that I had in a former ministry, and he used the air popper thing, and I was going to follow up with, well, hey, have you heard of this? Well, yeah, you've heard of it, and you're probably writing a book on it. So that's really cool. I don't understand it at all. I don't drink coffee, and people think, how is it that you can, be a pastor and all that stuff without drinking coffee. It's like, well, I have plenty of other vices. But coffee's, I just never could get into it. So, but I don't smoke cigars either. So,
Okay, well, you know,
there we go. I've been to, it's funny. I've done some work at Midwestern Seminary, which is in Kansas City, and they have the largest library. They have Spurgeon's library there
hmm,
on campus. Yeah, so yeah, it's really cool. You go and you see all of Spurgeon's books there, and they have a little room in there with a couple of his cigars in there and stuff. So kind of fun, but I don't think that flies too well into WARBC. So
yeah. It's as somebody said once about a school in the South, the industry that supports the school students get kicked out for supporting the industry by smoking their product. So
that's great. Okay, so this is a question I have not asked anyone else. I don't think I have. So you've been in ministry a while. You've seen things come and go. You've seen trends come and all that stuff and everything. And you have a son that's in ministry, right?
uh, not vocationally. I have two sons at Christian radio stations, but
Okay, okay,
they're my boys are all serving the Lord. But
okay, great. So let's say there's a young guy that's wanting to begin pastoring. Maybe he's fresh out of college or seminary, something like that, and he's like, okay, you know. What do you wish you would have known when you were starting out that you know now that could help me be a successful pastor for the glory of God? What would be some things that would come to your mind? I know there's probably a lot, but just one thing or two things.
yes, the things that really helped me, first of all, identify what I ought to be doing with my life. had to do with just serving in the local church.
Hmm.
And I believe in spiritual gifts, but I don't think you can take a test to figure out what your spiritual gifts are. I'm kind of death on those. But um, I was in some ways kind of like Timothy in that it's like Paul comes along and the people in Lystra, Iconium area said, "Hey,
Hmm.
yeah, consider taking this guy." And so I served in my home church. My pastor just, I, it's like, what can I do? And it's like, well, try this, try this, try this. And there were some things I tried that weren't my thing.
Hmm.
Uh, but there are other things that, he said, uh, if you can lead the band on the football field, you can lead music on Sunday nights. If you can sing for the school up at the Lutheran church from their balcony, you can do special music at our church. If and this and it was like, if you can stand up and talk at a speech contest, you could teach a Sunday school class. So there were all of those. I maybe guilted into it, so maybe it wasn't the greatest motivator for me, but I had a broad range of experience as a young man. And we have a young man in our church right now who's who believes that God's gifted him and he has that desire. And I'm fully behind it, to be in vocational ministry to one degree or another. And so we're putting him to work. And so
Hmm.
that would be, um, you I think you learn where you fit by serving.
Yeah.
So that would be, aside from the academic
Yeah.
component, I
Sure.
would I would say that's foundational because you get the character things resolved. And you look at ministry differently when you've been there and you've seen, it's not all. I mean, I remember how excited I was as a young man when somebody mistakenly called me pastor, but that kind of a lust for ministry
Yeah.
usually doesn't end well.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is like, there really has to be a willingness to serve and just a willingness to kind of try things and do things and maybe come out of your comfort zone. One thing I see, I'm at the age now where I'm not the old guy, but I'm not the young guy either, so it's kind of, so this is actually year 25 of pastoral ministry for me. And so I have enough experience where I've seen things go, but I still have a lot more learning to do, of course. But one of the things I see of guys coming out now is more of, and you kind of touched on this earlier, wanting the home run spot right away. And you had mentioned like, when you went to Milwaukee, it was like, don't wait for the best job right away or something. And yeah, I see that as a deficiency in some ways that we really need to do a better job. And I don't even know what that looks like of training guys to just be willing to serve. And even if it's not the best, I mean, I think of the first ministry spot I had, it definitely wasn't glamorous in any way, but boy, did I learn a lot. Um, yeah. So do you agree with that trend and the what we're seeing sometimes?
As far as just getting your ministry experience while you're working somewhere else, is that
Yeah.
what you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, and I know, it's not that I'm anti Bible college, but
Yeah.
it's, if I had it to do over again, I'd probably mess it up, but if I had to do over again, I probably would train vocationally,
Yeah.
and just serve and serve and serve, and then go to seminary.
Mhm.
Um, and about my Bible college degree was excellent. I had a great, I
Mhm.
mean,
Mhm.
a lot of role models in my life, people who had an influence, or at least some of them came from Bible college. So I don't
Yeah.
want to take anything away from that, but I also realize that there are a lot of options now that you can stay home and stay in your church and still
Yeah.
hard and get as advanced degree as you want.
Yeah, the world is definitely different than when you and I were doing education and the idea of online school was just non-existent when I was going to school, and I know for sure for you as well. I've often thought about that too, about would I get a undergraduate degree in Bible or biblical studies is what I did mine in. Um, and I don't know that it would. I think I probably would do like a business degree or something like that. and then hit seminary. And again, I'm not trying to undercut, as you said, you're not trying to undercut what the Bible college did for us, but I really think that that would have been a better way to go. And also because I believe the days of the Bible college are numbered in our country, So do you agree with that, or do you think that they're here to stay?
I think things are changing, and I'm not I don't see down the road very far when it comes to those kind of things. I'll let Barna handle that, but I'm I do I just think there are a lot more options, and I don't I probably, if I were a president of an educational institution, I would not like people saying that kind of thing. But I'm a shepherd, and I have a handful of young men that I think are going to be very valuable in our ministry in the future, and one of them may be my successor. So I'd like to keep those people around.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not a prophet either, so I could be way off on that. But that's just a trajectory that I'm seeing, and then I think that the church has to regain a much better approach to training pastors. I think churches we've done too much farming out of that in a lot of ways, but that's a whole nother conversation, and maybe I'm completely all wrong on that, but. One of the things I've always enjoyed in conversations with you is just talking about things and wondering and theology and stuff like that. So it's really helpful. Let's talk about resources here just for a second here. So if there were outside of advice, if what have you found as a resource that's been helpful to you in ministry? Could be book, could be blog, could be anything really, that has just been really helpful to you as a pastor that you can share.
Yeah. As far as my personal ministry,
Hmm.
and I never would have guessed a preaching book would be something that I refer to over and over again, but so much of my time is spent preparing to preach. And
Absolutely.
so, maybe everybody already has this one.
Oh yeah, it's a great book.
Wayne Chappell's book.
Hmm.
I didn't read this until, I don't know, a couple of years ago.
Great book.
But it very much dovetailed with what I already did, but just enhanced it. And
Hmm.
I have a routine that I've used for years in my preaching, that kind of the same resources, and I'll pull a few extras in from time to time. But this it just made me rethink what my priorities were when I'm
Yeah.
studying.
Hmm.
And so the idea of every text having a fallen creature focus, and
Yeah.
every text we're calling people to worship, we're showing who this big God is, and the
Hmm.
redemptive focus. And I'm going to Haiti next week, and I'm teaching soteriology,
Hmm.
but part of my soteriology class has to be gospel preaching,
Yeah.
and I'm very much going to camp on some of those things I've learned from that book. So that's that. When it comes to
Mm.
my own ministry, that's a big one. When it comes to discipleship, spiritual disciplines for the Christian life,
Oh sure, Whitney.
just like always taking somebody through that. And right now, once a week, I'm meeting with a guy.
Hmm.
Uh, we actually went through that as a church. Our other two elders would teach the contents of that book in Sunday school, which comes after our worship service. But in the worship service, I would take that topic and I would pick a text, and expound the text, and go after that. And my wife and I would teach the children. So once a month, we would have that theme, and it just the contents of that book, just even the chapter divisions, have had a real impact on the way we manage ministry here. And
Very
I'm
cool.
thinking I may even want to do that again in a few more years, and just take the whole church through that at once again.
Yeah, Whitney's that book has just done so well. It ages well. He wrote it a long time ago, and it's aged well and done well. I mean, I think David Mathis's book Habits of Grace has been a little bit more popular in recent years with some of the more younger pastors or whatever. Which that's another great book, by the way. But Whitney is just really good. Have you read Whitney's Praying the Bible? Have you read that book?
I haven't. No.
That's a great one too. That you want to grab that one. And as you're talking with your guys and stuff, prayer. His it's a real short little book. I'll tell you this. the first two chapters kind of cover it, and I feel like he just had to keep writing for, page requirements by a publisher or something. But and I mean, no disrespect to Dr. Whitney, he's been to my church, and he did a seminar for us and all that stuff. So I mean, no disrespect to him when I say that. But the first couple chapters, kind of get the book, but it's really good. So I would recommend that one as well. Um, but yeah, going back to the preaching book, Chapel's book, I see that has replaced. I mean, for years, Haddon Robinson's book, Biblical Preaching, was the textbook, and it's still a great book. But I really think Chapel's book has replaced that as kind of the gold standard for today. And of course, there's plenty of other good books on preaching out there, but when you've held up Chapel's, I was like, man, that's a great recommendation. So anyone who's watching this, if you haven't read that book, you need to. You mentioned, and I'll just do one or two more questions here, but you mentioned that you kind of have a workflow that you work through in preaching, the sermon writing. Could you give us a 10,000-foot view of that? Kind of what you do throughout the week?
Well, I mean, I do have an advantage having been here as long as I have been.
Hmm.
Uh, well, I mean, some people would call that a disadvantage because it's like you can't read, it's like preach a 3-year series and I'm got all my sermons, so I'm going to go preach them somewhere else. I can't
Right.
really do that. I'm
Right.
calling it an advantage because it forces me to stay fresh.
Agreed.
I'm not saying that I've never redone anything, because I with great tears go through my files sometimes and say, "Oh, I can't believe you did that to Romans." So I, when I first was here, it's like preached through Romans in 3 months. It's like, what in the world?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's changed. But normally, in an overview, I say I haven't done this before.
Hmm.
So, and so as far as choice of what I'm going to do on down the road, I try and stay out ahead a ways. I'm not super analytical where it's like, oh, I have all my sermons written for 6 months in advance. I just can't do that. That was the Jay Adams thing.
Yeah.
Um, just can't do that. But I do try and stay out as far as knowing what I'm going to do.
Hmm.
And so I know and another thing, one of our elders who's a missionary, and he's not living around us anymore, but he challenged me, um, don't just stay with the New Testament, with the apostolic scriptures. Get some Hebrew scriptures in from time to time.
Yeah.
And so right now I'm preaching through Ecclesiastes.
Oh, great book.
And so I haven't done that before. And
Yeah.
as far as I know, not anybody in our church has ever sat through a
Hmm.
series on Ecclesiastes. It's been rich. And one of my kids is going through some hard times and just told me this is good. I need this.
Yeah.
So that's
Sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
that's just as far as the big picture. Choosing a text, I'm going to be in Philippians after that, because I have not. I kind of preached through Philippians back in the early
Hmm.
80s, I think. But
Yeah.
again, I look at those files and weep.
And it's, we need the same stuff. And then there's such a changeover in churches over through the years too, that, even though you did it, a while ago, it's going to be fresh.
Mhm.
I preached through Ecclesiastes last year and absolutely loved it. And one of the reasons why I chose to do the sermon series was for the reasons you talked about. One is I was like, I I haven't done an Old Testament book in a while. I've done some work in Minor Prophets and things like that, but so I've done that. But as far as like an Old Testament book of just kind of spending extended time, we hadn't done that. And then the second reason was because I didn't understand it. I kind of knew about it, but it was one of those mysterious books that I'm like, one day I'll study this type thing. And so we did. And I don't know if you have Doug O'Donnell's commentary on that. That I found really, really helpful. That's probably my favorite commentary on it. But so I don't know. That might be a good resource as well. But good stuff there. Really good stuff. Um, so yeah, but so okay, the last thing is I just wanted to say thanks, obviously for being part of the WRBC, working really hard and pastoring up there in Rice Lake. You know, any word of encouragement for the fellow WRBC pastors as we wrap this up today?
I guess I've thought of this before. You talked about yourself as not being the old guy, not being the young guy.
Yeah.
And I've had the privilege of starting at 24 years old as a pastor.
Mm.
And now I guess as much as I hate to say it, I am one of the old guys. And I don't I'm warming up to that. I'm warming up to that. Some of my greatest benefit in the WRBC has been the old guys.
Mm.
And some of them I looked at as crotchety sticks in the mud, and some of them were. Some of them were. But on the other hand, we had a Bible conference one year where we just had the old guys preach, and
Mhm.
I was so challenged, so blessed because I gained a new respect for them when I saw them with an open Bible,
Yeah.
uh, and saw a passion for Christ coming out in them that doesn't come out at a camp board meeting or in a letter that they're sending out lobbying for this or that in the
Yeah.
fellowship churches. So I think there's such a value in having like-minded churches, whether it's our camp or
Mhm.
um, a church that's struggling. They've got relational problems, squabbles between the pastor or other leadership and the congregation, and it's nice to be able to see a fellowship of churches that we can say, hey, we're like-minded,
Yeah.
we're we're very on board with biblical counseling and with biblical peacemaking, and so there's so many benefits to have that fellowship of churches and
Mhm.
to be able to use the resources that are available, and that's even in a tiny little fellowship like ours, we have a lot to offer.
Well, boy, I appreciate what you bring to the team here, and thanks for taking time today to do this. I appreciate it, and yeah, blessings on you and your ministry.
Right.